I was standing in my garage with a wrench in my hand when I heard the side gate to my backyard slam open, followed by the unmistakable sound of heels clicking against my stone pathway. My property in Scottsdale, Arizona, had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could finally relax after years of apartment living and nosy landlords. The last thing I expected was someone just walking into my yard like they owned the place. I set down the wrench and wiped my hands on my jeans, listening carefully. The footsteps were purposeful, aggressive even, moving around the side of my house toward the back patio. I walked to the side door of my garage and looked out the window just in time to see a woman in her mid-50s with an aggressively blonde bob haircut and a clipboard marching across my lawn like she was on a military inspection. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment and oversized sunglasses that screamed entitlement. My heart rate picked up, not from fear, but from pure irritation. I had moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago, and the Homeowners Association had been a thorn in my side from day one. They had sent me 3 violation notices in the first month alone, complaining about everything from my trash, cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection day, to my mailbox being half an inch shorter than regulation height. I had dealt with each complaint professionally, fixing what needed fixing and politely ignoring the ridiculous ones. But this was different. This was my property, my private space, and nobody had the right to just walk in here uninvited. I stepped out of the garage and called out, "Excuse me, can I help you?" The woman turned, and even behind those oversized sunglasses, I could see the disdain on her face. She pulled the sunglasses down just enough to look at me over the rims, her expression one of supreme annoyance at being interrupted. "I am conducting a property inspection," she announced, her voice sharp and nasal. "I am Kimberly Morrison, president of the Desert Vista Homeowners Association, and according to our bylaws, I have every right to inspect your property for code violations." I blinked, processing what she had just said. "You have every right to trespass on my property." "This is not trespassing," she said, turning back to her clipboard and making notes. "This is standard HOA protocol. Now I can already see several violations. Your patio furniture is not from the approved vendor list. Your grill is visible from the neighboring property, and that tree over there," she pointed at my mesquite tree, "needs to be trimmed back at least 3 feet. It is blocking sight lines." I walked closer, my jaw clenched. "Miss Morrison, I do not know what you think gives you the right to be here, but you need to leave my property immediately." She looked up at me with a condescending smile that made my blood boil. "Mr. Matthews, is it? Perhaps you did not read the HOA agreement you signed when you purchased this property. The association has the authority to inspect homes and yards to ensure compliance with community standards. The authority to inspect does not mean the authority to trespass," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger building in my chest. "You need to schedule inspections, get permission, and respect property boundaries. You cannot just walk into someone's backyard." Kimberly waved her hand dismissively. "I do not have time to schedule appointments with every homeowner who thinks they are above the rules. I have a community to maintain, standards to uphold. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to inspect your back fence. I received a complaint that you may have repainted it without HOA approval." She actually turned her back on me and started walking toward my fence. I stood there for a moment, shocked by the sheer audacity of this woman. Then I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Miss Morrison," I said loudly, making sure my phone captured everything, "I am asking you one more time to leave my property. You are trespassing, and if you do not leave immediately, I will call the police." She spun around, her face flushed red. "You will do no such thing. I am the HOA president, and I am performing my duties. If you interfere with me, I can fine you up to $500 per day for obstruction." "Call the police," I said, already dialing. "We will let them sort out who has the right to be here." Kimberly's expression shifted from condescending to furious. She marched back toward me, her heels stabbing into my lawn with each step. "You are making a huge mistake. I have connections in this community and I can make your life very difficult. Do you understand me?" I held up my phone, still recording. "What I understand is that you are trespassing on my property. You have been asked to leave multiple times and you are now threatening me. I have all of this on video." Her mouth opened and closed a few times like a fish gasping for air. Then she seemed to collect herself, drawing up to her full height, which was still several inches shorter than me even in her heels. "Fine," she spat. "But you will be receiving a formal notice of violation for multiple infractions. The HOA board will be meeting next week and your name will be at the top of our agenda. I hope you have a good lawyer, because you are going to need one." "I will take my chances," I said. "Now get off my property." She turned on her heel and stormed toward the gate, but not before making a few more notes on her clipboard. I followed her at a distance, making sure she actually left and did not try to snoop around any other areas of my yard. As she reached the gate, she turned back one more time. "This is not over, Mr. Matthews, not by a long shot." Then she was gone, the gate slamming shut behind her. I stood there for a moment, adrenaline pumping through my veins, my phone still in my hand. I stopped the recording and immediately saved it to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Something told me I was going to need that video. I walked back into my house and sat down at my kitchen table, trying to process what had just happened. My name is Oliver Matthews, and I am a software engineer who works from home. I had bought this house specifically because I wanted privacy and space, somewhere I could set up a home office and not have to deal with the chaos of apartment living. The HOA had seemed like a minor inconvenience when I was signing the paperwork, something that would maybe send me an occasional reminder about lawn maintenance or holiday decoration restrictions. I had been so wrong. I opened my laptop and pulled up the HOA documents I had signed when I bought the house. I had skimmed them at the time, focusing mainly on the monthly fees and basic rules. Now I read through every line, looking for anything that gave Kimberly Morrison or any other HOA member the right to enter my property without permission. After an hour of reading, I found it. There was a clause buried in Section 12, Subsection 4, that stated the HOA had the right to conduct reasonable inspections of properties to ensure compliance with community standards. However, the very next paragraph stated that such inspections would be conducted with advance notice to the homeowner, and at a mutually agreed upon time. Kimberly had violated the HOA's own bylaws. She had no legal right to be on my property without my permission, and she definitely had no right to enter my backyard through a locked gate. I took screenshots of the relevant pages and sent them to myself via email. Then I did what I probably should have done when this whole mess started. I called a lawyer. The law firm of Patterson and Associates had good reviews online, and they specialized in property law and HOA disputes. I got lucky and was able to speak with someone right away. I explained the situation to the paralegal who answered, and she put me on hold for a few minutes before transferring me to one of their attorneys. "Mr. Matthews, this is David Patterson," a deep voice said on the other end of the line. "I understand you have an HOA issue." "That is putting it mildly," I said, and then I told him everything that had happened. He listened without interrupting, and I could hear him typing notes as I spoke. "You have video of this incident?" he asked when I finished. "Yes, from the moment I asked her to leave until she walked off my property." "Good. That is going to be crucial. Now I need you to listen carefully. What happened today was trespassing, plain and simple. The HOA bylaws do allow for inspections, but only with proper notice and consent. This woman violated your rights and the HOA's own rules. I want you to file a police report immediately. Do not wait. The longer you wait, the less seriously the authorities will take it." "You really think I should involve the police?" I asked. "I mean, she is just a busybody HOA president." "Is it worth escalating, Mr. Matthews? This is not about whether she is worth your time. This is about establishing a legal record of harassment and trespassing. If you let this go, she will do it again, and she will do it to other people in your neighborhood. Trust me, I have handled dozens of cases like this. These HOA tyrants only stop when someone stands up to them with legal consequences." His words made sense. I thanked him and told him I would call him back after filing the police report. Then I dialed the non-emergency police number for Scottsdale. The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would be out within the hour. True to their word, about 45 minutes later, there was a knock on my front door. I opened it to find 2 officers standing on my porch, one a tall man in his 30s with a serious expression, and the other a woman who looked barely out of the academy with sharp, observant eyes. "Mr. Matthews," the male officer said, "I am Officer Hernandez, and this is Officer Chen. We are here about a trespassing complaint. I invited them in and offered them seats in my living room. They both declined, preferring to stand, and I walked them through exactly what had happened." Officer Chen took notes while Officer Hernandez asked questions. "You have the video?" Officer Hernandez asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them the footage. They watched in silence, and I could see Officer Chen's eyebrows raise when Kimberly made her threat about making my life difficult. "She said she has the authority to enter your property?" Officer Hernandez asked, replaying that part of the video. "That is what she claimed," I said. "But I checked the HOA bylaws, and they clearly state that inspections require advance notice and homeowner consent." Officer Chen stopped writing and looked at her partner. "This is pretty cut and dry trespassing." Officer Hernandez nodded. "I agree. Mr. Matthews, we are going to file this report, and I recommend you seek a restraining order against this woman. In the meantime, I will pay her a visit and explain that HOA president does not mean she has the right to enter private property without consent." "Will she be arrested?" I asked. "Not unless she does it again," Officer Hernandez said. "This is her warning. But if she violates your property again after being warned, then yes, we will arrest her for criminal trespassing." That was not the answer I wanted, but I understood. The justice system moves slowly, and a first offense trespassing by an HOA president was probably not high on their priority list. Still, having a police report on file was important, and I was glad I had made the call. The officers left, and I spent the rest of the evening researching restraining orders and HOA disputes. The more I read, the angrier I became. Kimberly Morrison had been the HOA president for 7 years, and from what I could find in online community forums and neighborhood social media groups, I was not the first person she had targeted. There were dozens of complaints about her aggressive tactics, her arbitrary rule enforcement, and her general tyrannical behavior. Several people had tried to vote her out, but she had a loyal group of supporters who were just as petty and controlling as she was. They formed a voting bloc that kept her in power, and anyone who challenged her found themselves buried under violation notices and fines. I was not going to be one of those people who just rolled over and accepted it. The next morning, I woke up to find an envelope shoved under my front door. It was a formal notice of violation from the Desert Vista HOA, signed by Kimberly Morrison. The letter listed 8 different violations, including my patio furniture, my grill, my mesquite tree, the color of my front door. Apparently it was not from the approved color palette, even though it was the same color as when I bought the house. My doormat, too decorative. My house numbers wrong font, and my garden hose visible from the street. The total fines amounted to $3,000, payable within 30 days, or I would be subject to a lien on my property. I stood in my kitchen, reading the letter 3 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. $3,000 for a doormat and a garden hose. I called David Patterson again, and this time he did not sound surprised at all. "This is retaliation," he said immediately. "She is trying to intimidate you into dropping the trespassing complaint. Do not pay a single cent of those fines. I will draft a response letter today, and we will fight every single one of these alleged violations. In the meantime, I am going to file for an emergency restraining order. Her behavior is harassment, and we need to shut it down before it escalates further." "How much is all of this going to cost me?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "My retainer is $2,000, and we will bill hourly after that. But Mr. Matthews, if we win this case, and I am confident we will, we can sue the HOA for attorney fees, damages, and harassment. You may actually come out ahead financially." That made me feel a little better. I agreed to his terms, and he said he would email me the retainer agreement within the hour. True to his word, the documents arrived in my inbox 50 minutes later. I signed them electronically and sent them back with a payment. I was now officially in a legal battle with my HOA. The next few days were tense. I kept waiting for Kimberly to show up again, or for another absurd violation notice to appear, but everything was quiet. Too quiet. I later found out why. Officer Hernandez had apparently paid Kimberly a visit at her home the day after I filed the report. According to a neighbor who witnessed the encounter and later told me about it at the community mailboxes, Kimberly had not taken the warning well. She had argued with the officer for 20 minutes, insisting that she had every right to inspect properties, and that I was the one breaking the rules by refusing her entry. Officer Hernandez had apparently been very clear. HOA rules do not override property rights, and if she set foot on my property again without permission, she would be arrested. Kimberly had slammed her door in his face, but she had gotten the message, for now. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, David Patterson had sent a formal response to the HOA's violation notice, disputing every single fine and demanding that they provide photographic evidence and specific bylaw references for each alleged violation. He also included a warning that any further retaliatory actions would result in a lawsuit for harassment. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong again. 1 week after the initial trespassing incident, I came home from a grocery store run to find my front yard had been dug up. Not by an animal or by accident. Someone had deliberately taken a shovel and torn up about 20 square feet of my carefully maintained desert landscaping. Rocks were scattered everywhere, plants were uprooted, and there was a hole about 2 feet deep, right in the middle of my yard. I stood there, groceries in hand, staring at the destruction. My mind immediately went to Kimberly, but I had no proof. I set the groceries inside and called Officer Hernandez directly. He had given me his card and told me to contact him if anything else happened. He arrived 30 minutes later, and his expression darkened when he saw my yard. "You have security cameras?" he asked. I shook my head. I never thought I would need them. You need them now, he said firmly. I will file a report for vandalism, but without video evidence, it is going to be hard to prove who did this. It was Kimberly Morrison, I said. It had to be. I believe you, Officer Hernandez said, but belief is not proof. She will just deny it and we will have nothing to charge her with. My advice? Get cameras installed today. Front, back, and sides. If she or anyone else comes back, we will catch them. I called a security company that afternoon and paid for expedited installation. By the next morning, I had 8 high-definition cameras covering every angle of my property, all connected to cloud storage in my phone. If anyone so much as breathed on my property wrong, I would have video evidence. I also called David Patterson and told him about the vandalism. He was furious. "This is escalating," he said. "We need that restraining order and we need it now. I am going to contact the court and see if we can move up the hearing date. In the meantime, document everything. Take photos, keep records, save every email and letter. We are building a case." The hearing got moved up by 3 days, which meant I only had to wait another 4 days before facing Kimberly Morrison in court. Those 4 days felt like an eternity. I barely slept, constantly checking my security cameras and jumping at every sound. My work suffered because I could not concentrate, and I found myself pacing my house at all hours, waiting for the next attack. It came 2 nights before the hearing. I was working late, trying to catch up on a project deadline, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my cameras. I opened the app and felt my stomach drop. Kimberly Morrison was standing at my front gate, bolt cutters in hand, cutting through the lock. I immediately called 911. "There is someone breaking into my property right now," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I have video evidence. I need police here immediately." The dispatcher kept me on the line while I watched Kimberly on my phone screen. She got through the lock and pushed open the gate, walking into my front yard like she owned it. She was carrying something in her other hand, and it took me a moment to realize it was a tape measure. She was measuring my fence at midnight after breaking my lock with bolt cutters. I heard sirens in the distance, and apparently so did Kimberly, because her head snapped up and she looked around frantically. She dropped the tape measure and ran toward the gate, but she was not fast enough. 2 police cruisers pulled up just as she made it to the sidewalk, and officers jumped out with their hands on their weapons. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them." I watched from my security camera as Kimberly raised her hands, the bolt cutters still dangling from one hand. An officer immediately moved in and took the tool from her, and I saw Officer Hernandez step into frame. Even from the camera angle, I could see he was angry. I grabbed my phone and ran outside. By the time I got to my front gate, Kimberly was already in handcuffs. "Mr. Matthews," Officer Hernandez said when he saw me, "we have got her. Breaking and entering, possession of burglary tools, and criminal trespassing. She is not talking her way out of this one." Kimberly's face was red and she was sputtering. "This is ridiculous. I am the HOA president." "I was just conducting a late-night inspection." "At midnight," Officer Chen said, appearing next to her partner. "With bolt cutters. Madam, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent and I suggest you use it." They read Kimberly her full rights and loaded her into the back of a police cruiser. I stood there, watching the scene unfold, feeling a strange mix of vindication and disbelief. This was really happening. The HOA president, who had made my life hell for months, was being arrested on my property. Officer Hernandez approached me with an evidence bag containing the bolt cutters. "We are going to need a statement, and I will need access to your security footage." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." I spent the next hour giving my statement and downloading the security footage for the officers. They took photos of the damaged lock and the tape measure Kimberly had dropped. By the time they finished, it was almost 2 in the morning. What happens now? I asked Officer Hernandez as he was preparing to leave. She will be processed and held until her arraignment, which will probably be tomorrow afternoon. Given that she was already warned about trespassing, and given the circumstances of this arrest, I doubt she will get a favorable bail. You should contact your attorney first thing in the morning and let him know what happened. This significantly strengthens your case for the restraining order. I thanked him and went back inside, my mind racing. I should have been exhausted, but I was wide awake, adrenaline still pumping through my system. I made myself some tea and sat down at my kitchen table, trying to process everything. Kimberly Morrison had actually broken into my property with bolt cutters at midnight. Because she was so convinced that she had the right to inspect my property that she was willing to commit a crime to do it. The woman was unhinged. I called David Patterson first thing in the morning and told him what happened. He let out a low whistle. Well, that just made our case about 10 times stronger. I will contact the prosecutor's office today and make sure they are aware of the ongoing harassment and trespassing issues. This is not just breaking and entering. This is stalking and harassment with a pattern of behavior. She is looking at serious charges. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the next afternoon, but given Kimberly's arrest, I was not sure if it would even happen. David assured me it would proceed as planned, and that Kimberly's arrest would only help our case. I showed up at the courthouse at 1:30, dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt. David met me outside, looking confident and professional in his suit. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I will ever be," I said. We walked inside and found the courtroom. To my surprise, Kimberly was already there, sitting with her own attorney. She was out on bail, though she looked like she had aged 10 years in the last 2 days. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, and she would not make eye contact with me. The hearing started promptly at 2 o'clock. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Rebecca Walsh, listened as David presented our case. He showed the video of Kimberly trespassing the first time, the retaliatory violation notices, the evidence of the vandalized yard, and finally, the security footage of her breaking into my property with bolt cutters. Kimberly's attorney, a nervous-looking man who seemed out of his depth, tried to argue that Kimberly was simply performing her duties as HOA president and had not intended any harm. Judge Walsh shut him down immediately. "Counselor, your client broke onto private property at midnight with bolt cutters after being explicitly warned by police to stay away. That is not performing HOA duties. That is criminal behavior. I am granting the restraining order. Miss Morrison is to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Matthews, his property, and his place of work at all times. If she violates this order, she will be arrested immediately. Do you understand, Miss Morrison?" Kimberly nodded, her face pale. "I need a verbal response," Judge Walsh said firmly. "Yes, Your Honor," Kimberly said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good. This hearing is adjourned." We walked out of the courtroom and I felt like I could finally breathe. David shook my hand. "That went better than expected," he said. Now we wait for the criminal trial. Given everything that has happened, I would not be surprised if the prosecutor offers her a plea deal. But either way, she is not going to be bothering you anymore. I thanked him and headed back to my car. As I was walking through the parking lot, a woman approached me. She was in her 40s with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes. "Excuse me, are you Oliver Matthews?" she asked. I tensed immediately, but something about her demeanor told me she was not a threat. Yes, I said cautiously. My name is Patricia Jennings. I live 3 streets over from you in the same HOA. I was at the courthouse for something else and I saw your hearing. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, I repeated, confused. For standing up to Kimberly Morrison, Patricia said, her voice emotional. She has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. She fined my husband and me $5,000 because our kid's swing set was 6 inches taller than the HOA allowed. She reported my elderly neighbor to code enforcement because his grass was 2 inches too long while he was in the hospital recovering from surgery. She has made so many people's lives miserable, and nobody has ever fought back because they are scared of her. I did not know what to say. I had been so focused on my own situation that I had not really thought about all the other people Kimberly had targeted. I am just doing what anyone should do when their rights are violated, I said finally. No, Patricia said, shaking her head. Most people just pay the fines and try to avoid her. You fought back and you won. That means something. There is a group of homeowners who have been talking about trying to remove Kimberly from the HOA board, but we did not think we had a chance. Now, with everything that has happened, maybe we actually do. Would you be willing to help us? I thought about it for a moment. A week ago, I would have said no. I would have been happy to just have Kimberly out of my life and move on. But after everything I had been through, after seeing how one person with a little bit of power could abuse it so thoroughly, I knew I could not just walk away. Yes, I said. I will help. Patricia's face lit up. Thank you so much. I will get your number from the neighborhood directory, and I will be in touch. We are planning a meeting next week to discuss strategy. She hurried off, and I got in my car, feeling a strange sense of purpose. This was not just about me anymore. This was about an entire community that had been bullied and intimidated for years. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. Kimberly's criminal trial was scheduled, and the prosecutor's office contacted me to serve as a witness. They were not offering her a plea deal because, according to the assistant district attorney I spoke with, they wanted to send a message that HOA officials are not above the law. Meanwhile, Patricia organized a meeting at her house with about 15 other homeowners who had been targeted by Kimberly. I listened as person after person shared their stories of harassment, excessive fines, and intimidation. One man had been fined for having Christmas lights up until December 27th, because the HOA rules stated they must be taken down by December 26th. A woman had been reported to Child Protective Services by Kimberly because her children were playing outside past 8 at night, which Kimberly claimed violated noise ordinances, even though there was no such rule in the HOA bylaws. The stories went on, and with each one, my resolve strengthened. We had to get Kimberly and her cronies off the HOA board. Patricia had done her research. According to the HOA bylaws, board members could be recalled with a petition signed by 30% of homeowners, followed by a special election. The Desert Vista HOA had 212 homes, which meant we needed signatures from 64 homeowners to force a recall election. We organized a door-to-door campaign, and I was amazed at how many people were willing to sign. Within 2 weeks, we had 93 signatures, more than enough. We submitted the petition to the HOA board, which was required by the bylaws to schedule a special election within 30 days. Kimberly, who was still technically the president despite her legal troubles, tried to fight it. Her attorney sent a letter claiming the petition was invalid because some of the signatures were not properly notarized, even though the bylaws did not require notarization. David Patterson responded on our behalf, and the issue was resolved quickly. The election was scheduled for 6 weeks from the date of the petition submission, In the meantime, Kimberly's criminal trial took place. I testified about the trespassing, the harassment, and finally, the break-in with the bolt cutters. The prosecution showed the security footage, and I watched the jury's faces as they saw Kimberly cutting through my lock at midnight. They were appalled. Kimberly took the stand in her own defense, which her attorney probably should not have allowed. She rambled about how she was just trying to maintain community standards, how homeowners like me were ruining the neighborhood by refusing to follow the rules, and how she deserved respect for all her years of volunteer service. It did not go well for her. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all charges: breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, possession of burglary tools, and vandalism for the damage to my yard. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail, with 3 months suspended, plus 2 years of probation, community service, and restitution for the damages to my property. As the bailiff led her away, Kimberly looked at me one last time. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, just defeat. I felt no satisfaction in seeing her led off to jail. I just felt tired and ready for this whole nightmare to be over. The special election took place on a Saturday morning in the community center. Patricia had organized a slate of candidates to run against Kimberly and the 2 other board members who had enabled her behavior. I was not running myself because I did not want that level of responsibility, but I was there to support the people who were. The turnout was incredible. Nearly 70% of homeowners showed up to vote, which was unheard of for HOA elections. Usually, these things were decided by a handful of people who actually cared enough to participate. When the votes were counted, it was a landslide. All 3 of Kimberly's loyalists were voted out, and Patricia and her team won their seats by comfortable margins. The neighborhood had spoken, and they were done with the tyranny. Patricia was elected as the new HOA president, and one of the first things she did was move to rescind all of the excessive fines that Kimberly had imposed over the past year. The board voted unanimously in favor, and I received a letter 2 weeks later informing me that the $3,000 fine had been voided. Life slowly returned to normal. I replaced my gate lock and repaired the damage to my yard. My security cameras stayed up, just in case, but I no longer felt like I was living under siege. About 3 months after the election, I was working in my garage when someone knocked on my front door. I tensed for a moment, old habits dying hard, but when I opened the door, it was just Patricia with a plate of cookies. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, handing me the plate, "and to give you an update. The new board has completely reformed the HOA rules. We have cut the number of regulations in half, eliminated all of the petty fines, and implemented a new complaint process that requires actual evidence and community input before any action is taken. It is like we are living in a different neighborhood." "That is great news," I said, genuinely happy to hear it. "It would not have happened without you," Patricia said. "You were the first person to stand up to Kimberly, and that gave the rest of us the courage to do the same. So thank you." After she left, I stood on my porch with the plate of cookies, looking out at my quiet street. The afternoon sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My neighborhood felt peaceful in a way it never had before. I thought about Kimberly Morrison, sitting in jail for the next few months, probably convinced that she had been wronged by everyone around her. I wondered if she would ever understand that her downfall was entirely her own doing, that if she had just respected people's rights and boundaries, none of this would have happened. But people like Kimberly rarely see their own faults. They are too busy trying to control everyone else. I went back inside and got back to work, feeling grateful for the peace I had fought so hard to achieve. My house was finally the sanctuary I had always wanted it to be. My property was mine again, protected by law and by a community that had learned the hard way what happens when power goes unchecked. The legal bills had been substantial, but David Patterson had been right. We sued the HOA for my attorney fees, and the new board settled quickly, not wanting to waste money defending Kimberly's actions. I got every penny back, plus an additional $10,000 for the harassment and emotional distress. I used that money to renovate my backyard, adding a proper patio and updating my landscaping. I even got new patio furniture from a vendor that was not on any approved list, because there was no approved list anymore. The new HOA board trusted homeowners to make their own aesthetic choices. It was a novel concept, apparently. 6 months after the restraining order was granted, I ran into Kimberly one more time. I was at a grocery store in a different part of Scottsdale, far from our neighborhood, when I saw her in the produce section. She was alone, looking thin and tired, her hair no longer perfectly styled. She saw me at the same moment I saw her, and for a second we just stared at each other across a display of avocados. Then she turned and walked quickly in the other direction. I did not follow. I just continued my shopping, grabbed what I needed, and left. That was the last time I ever saw Kimberly Morrison. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband sold their house about a year after the trial and moved to a different state. Some people said she could not handle the humiliation of what had happened. Others said her husband had forced the move because he was tired of being associated with her reputation. I did not really care what the reason was. I was just glad she was gone. The Desert Vista HOA continued to thrive under Patricia's leadership. Homeowner satisfaction increased dramatically, and several families who had been planning to move decided to stay. Property values went up, and the neighborhood became known as one of the most desirable communities in Scottsdale, not because of strict rules, but because people actually wanted to live there. I remained active in the community, attending board meetings occasionally and staying informed about neighborhood issues. I never ran for the board myself, but I made sure to vote in every election and to speak up when I saw something that needed addressing. The experience changed me in ways I did not expect. Before all of this, I had been someone who avoided conflict, who preferred to keep my head down and not make waves. But standing up to Kimberly, Morrison taught me that sometimes conflict is necessary, that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable and expensive and exhausting. My property was more than just a house now. It was a symbol of what happens when ordinary people refuse to be bullied, when they stand up for their rights and demand accountability from those in power. I spent many evenings sitting on my back patio, the same one that Kimberly had tried to inspect without permission, watching the desert sunset and feeling grateful for the peace I had fought for. My mesquite tree, the one she had wanted me to cut down, provided perfect shade. My grill, which she had cited as a violation, cooked perfect steaks. My patio furniture, not from any approved vendor, was comfortable and exactly what I wanted. Everything about my property was exactly as it should be, mine, protected and free from tyranny. David Patterson and I stayed in touch, and he referred several other clients to me who were dealing with similar HOA issues. I became something of an informal consultant, helping homeowners understand their rights and navigate disputes with overzealous boards. I never charged anyone for my time. I just wanted to help people avoid the nightmare I had gone through. One of those people was a young couple who had just moved into a neighborhood a few miles from mine. Their HOA was trying to fine them for painting their front door red, claiming it violated community standards. I helped them research their bylaws, connected them with David Patterson, and supported them through the dispute process. They won, and their red door stayed exactly as it was. Each small victory felt like a continuation of what I had started, when I refused to let Kimberly Morrison walk all over my property rights. Years passed, and the incident that had consumed my life for those intense months became a story I occasionally told at parties, usually to groans and sympathetic laughter from other homeowners who had their own HOA horror stories. But for me, it would always be more than just a story. It was a turning point, a moment when I learned that standing up for yourself is not just about pride or stubbornness. It is about principle, about refusing to let anyone, no matter what authority they claim to have, violate your fundamental rights. My house in Scottsdale remained my sanctuary. I worked from my home office, enjoyed my backyard, and lived peacefully in a community that had learned to value freedom over control. And every time I walked past my front gate, where Kimberly had cut through the lock with bolt cutters in a desperate attempt to assert her imaginary authority, I remembered that moment when I decided to call the police instead of backing down. That single decision had changed everything, not just for me, but for an entire neighborhood of people who had been too intimidated to fight back. The security cameras I had installed during the height of the conflict stayed up, not because I was paranoid, but because they were a reminder. A reminder that evidence matters, that documentation is power, and that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to make sure their actions are visible for everyone to see. I lived in that house for many more years, and in all that time, I never received another unreasonable HOA violation notice. The new board operated with transparency and fairness, and the neighborhood flourished because of it. Sometimes I wondered if Kimberly Morrison ever thought about what happened, if she ever realized that her obsession with control had cost her everything. Her reputation, her position, her home, and her freedom. All because she could not accept that being HOA president did not give her the right to violate people's property rights. But mostly, I did not think about her at all. I was too busy enjoying the life I had built, the home I had defended, and the peace I had earned, my property, my rules. That was how it should have been from the beginning, and that was how it would always be from that moment forward. Nobody, not an HOA president, not a board member, not anyone, would ever make me feel like a stranger on my own land again. The desert sunset painted my patio in golden light as I sat there one evening, years after the whole ordeal had ended, and I realized something important. The fight had been worth it. Every dollar spent on legal fees, every sleepless night, every moment of stress and anger and frustration had been worth it because I had stood up not just for myself, but for the principle that your home is your castle, and nobody has the right to breach those walls without your permission. That was the legacy of my battle with Kimberly Morrison and the Desert Vista HOA. Not just a legal victory, but a reminder to everyone in my community that rights matter, that boundaries matter, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply say no when someone tries to take what is yours. My gate was locked, my cameras were rolling, and my home was exactly as I wanted it to be, free, private, and completely mine. And that was exactly how it should be.